Hey everyone, it's me, Dave. I've come here today with a short video to talk about a question that I've received in the past, and I thought would be very interesting to answer. People have been asking me, what is my least favorite episode of High Guardian Spice, and why? Now, if I had to guess, a lot of people would probably say episode 3 when asked that question, for reasons I won't get into, you know why. But to me personally, I think the worst episode in this series has to be episode 11. Now, for a lot of people, this may be confusing, either A, because they never watched past episode 1, or B, because they just didn't pay attention while this episode was running. And I can't really blame them for that. I'll be honest, the first time I watched through High Guardian Spice, my brain just kind of shut off during this episode, and I wasn't really paying attention at all. I just wanted it to end. But rewatching this again with a more clearer mind, I realize now that this episode is one of the worst in the series. For one reason in particular, it's packed to the brim with inconsistencies, so many that it made my brain want to shut off again. But not this time. We're going to analyze this with a clear head, hopefully. Now, to some, this analysis is going to come across as nitpicky, and it kind of is a little bit. But there's a reason that I'm focusing on a lot of the smaller problems, because they start to add up real fast. So, without any further ado, why don't we just get into this? Okay, so right at the start, we already have a couple problems. The premise for this episode is basically the triad are testing out these children to send them on their first suicide mission, or second if you want to count the cave episode. Why they're deciding to send these inexperienced first years on this mission instead of, I don't know, a trained guardian? It's up in the air. Maybe they're understaffed. I can believe that since the potions teacher has probably killed off a lot of their trainees over the years. One thing those with keener eyes will notice right away is that Amaryllis is using an axe. More specifically, Snapdragon's axe, the one she got in the episode where they made all the magic users train as warriors for no reason in particular. So why is she using one? She's a magic user, isn't she? Are they not allowed to use Terra Spheres? Well, no, Sage is using her Terra Spheres, so what's going on exactly? Did Amaryllis just decide, you know what, today's the day I'm gonna break out the axe again? Well, she did seem to like it, so maybe that's it. But in the cave episode, she didn't bring her axe with her, so why is she suddenly bringing it out here? She's actively trying to get picked for this mission, and she seems to think that her Terra Sphere would be a lot better in these situations than her axe would, so why does she bring it here? I've talked about this before, but if you haven't seen that video, the answer is pretty simple. It's because if she brought her Terra Sphere with her, she would be way too strong. She'd be like Sage blasting a hole straight through that damn thing's chest. So why did the writers think this was a problem? Because Cal needs to get picked for the mission. If Amaryllis gets picked instead of Cal, that means Snapdragon wouldn't break out and fight anyone, so he wouldn't have his sidebar conversation with Caraway. And if they decided to have more people come along on the mission, Amaryllis might get in the way of their fight and also make things a lot more complicated. But they also can't just not have her be here, because that wouldn't really make sense. She'd definitely be first to sign up for something like this. So their solution is to make her an idiot. She decides for no reason to suddenly bring this axe along that she hasn't used for a long period of time, and she doesn't use any magic whatsoever, even though that's what she's most skilled at. Now, this little starting nitpick is emblematic of my main problem with this episode. Characters are acting inconsistently so that the plot can happen. When the writers want something to happen, instead of putting in the extra effort to make sure that it all makes sense, they just kind of cheat their way into having it happen. But why don't we rewind a bit? Remember when I said that the students should not be being sent on this mission? Well, that becomes even more true when you factor in what I'm about to show you next.
Great teamwork. Nice use of violence.
The squid is a mech suit. Now, when I first saw this with my friend, our only reaction was to bust a gut laughing just because of how unexpected and stupid it is. Now, ignoring the discussion about the fact that these people have mech suits in their world, we don't have time. They have just established that they have access to an aquatic mech that works underwater, can fight multiple students at once, and also they have access to people who can easily pilot it. If they're having problems with an underwater dragon, why don't they just send in Caraway piloting the mech suit? Or even better, instead of all this stupid Guardian training, why don't they train the students to pilot the mech suits instead and send them down there? Now, even if you want to argue that sending the students down there to deal with it was some kind of training exercise, which is really stupid because there are a lot better ways to train these people than sending them on missions that you know they're going to fail because they're inexperienced children, it's still utterly ridiculous that they have access to all of these tools and decide not to use them. The only real argument you could make as to why they don't use this mech suit is that maybe it can't handle deep underwater pressure. Or maybe there's some kind of treaty that disallows squid mechs being in use in the mermaid's territory. That seems kinda dumb, but it's a better excuse than nothing. The writers just wanted a flashy sequence with a giant squid mech and didn't take 2 seconds to think about it. That means it's left up to the audience to come up with a bunch of headcanon excuses as to why these people are such morons. If the audience has to constantly fill in the gaps and make shit up because of your bad writing, then we have a problem. Anyway, all the students get out of the water and Caraway flicks his wrists and teleports the mech away. Yes, apparently they're so powerful they can just summon these things whenever they want, and they never use them. We don't have time to talk about that because whoa, someone just tried to murder a member of staff. After Caraway has long gotten out of his mech suit, this student decides to take out his crossbow, wait for him to drop his guard, and try to shoot him in the face. So, what's the punishment for trying to murder a man? Nothing! Caraway just casually continues on with his conversation like nothing just happened there. A student just literally tried to kill one of the teachers and no one does anything about it. He doesn't get threatened with detention, he doesn't get threatened with suspension, nothing, nope, not a zilch, zero. That student had no way of knowing that Caraway could catch that arrow. He seemed to be pretty much off guard the whole time, and I don't even think any of the students have seen him fight before. If he wasn't a trained guardian, he could have just died there. A student would have just shot him straight through the head with an arrow. Would they have done something then? I don't know. Now this moment is very important because what we're about to talk about next is everyone's favorite scene in the show. God, can this episode just be over already? Fucking kill me.
It's peaceful being on the water.
Don't you mean in the water? I know you'd rather be swimming with the other mermaids.
That's racist.
Talking about?
I just think you and the mermaids are gonna get along well.
Why did they draw Snapdragon's ass like
You
that?
remember gallivanting around the autumn processional? You loved making such a splash in your mermaid costume.
That was the worst pun I've heard in my life.
I know I'm not a mermaid.
No, but you loved dressing like one, didn't you? All mermaid up like the frothiest queen of the seas.
Shut up!
Your dad must be thrilled to call you his daughter.
Ooh, burn! Oh, damn. It's now. Oh, gee. Okay, maybe this episode's better than I thought. Wow. Man, even in Fantasyland, the teachers break up the fights before it gets interesting. Okay, all jokes aside, Snapdragon suddenly freaking out and beating the shit out of Cal is probably one of the most interesting things that's happened this whole series. But of course, every time they throw something cool in, they have to ruin it. I brought this up before in my video on the school system, but if you haven't seen that, Caraway says this.
Cut the sarcasm, Snapdragon. The triad would want me to suspend you.
That's right, you heard it here first, folks. Assaulting another student is grounds for suspension. So they remain consistent with this, right? Hell no. There are so many examples in other episodes of students basically assaulting other students, and even teachers assaulting other students, and there are no repercussions for that at all. And again, as I showed before, in this very episode, a student just tried to kill one of the teachers and doesn't get any punishment whatsoever. The writers want Caraway and Snapdragon to have a heart-to-heart for reasons that should be obvious if you've watched this episode. But in order to do that, they use his fight with Cal as a jumping-off point, and Caraway basically punishing him for that happening. The reason this excuse doesn't work is because there are so many examples of other students doing basically the exact same thing and not receiving any punishment at all, so it makes no sense for this to suddenly be a problem. Whenever they use this brain-dead writing to get plot beats to happen, they don't think about the overarching world that they've created and set up. Maybe these problems could have been avoided if they used their budget to hire someone with common sense. Although no, they need that money to hire 8 storyboard artists for one episode. I'm glad they're spending their budget on important things that are 100% necessary. Unlike, consistency. So we get introduced to these magic rings which allow you to transform into a mermaid so long as you're submerged in water. Although they jump out of the water a bit and don't seem to transform back, so maybe you just have to keep it moist for a while. They don't say anything about a time limit on the transformation, so maybe it lasts just as long as you're wearing the ring and have it moist, so basically forever. Kinda makes me wonder why Caraway isn't using a magical ring to sustain his transformation, instead of, taking a potion all the time. That sounds annoying and costly. Like, just put a ring on and make sure to keep it moist for a bit. That can't be too difficult. Hell, in some of the other episodes, we see wizards make water out of nothing, so it probably wouldn't be too hard to have an enchantment to keep it moist for as long as you need it. Anyway, they're sent on this mission, all their weapons transform into like aquatic variants of them, except for Sage's Terrasphere. And for some reason, Rosemary gets her sword taken away by Caraway. Okay, now maybe I'm just an idiot, so if I'm wrong, you can just send a comment down and correct me, but I don't think there's a reason for him to do this. The other girls get to keep their weapons, why doesn't Rosemary? Is it because of Flowering Thorn's enchantment? Is that it? Well, I don't think they say that, so we can't really assume that that's the case. So yeah, they just randomly take her sword away for no reason, leaving her basically defenseless for a lot of the mission. So they're putting their students' lives in danger more actively than before. The other students get to keep their weapons, so why doesn't Rose? It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I've been talking about this episode for way too long and I want the pain to end, so I'm going to skip forward a bit. So this dragon thing was once friends with the mermaids, but then it got affected by the rot, so it became like a psychopath and started trying to eat them. My first response to this would probably be to just put it down immediately. It's a danger to society and is actively trying to kill a lot of the mermaids, and we don't even know if we can turn it back or what's affecting it, so best solution would be to just drop it. They decide to go with this convoluted plan of like trapping it inside the castle or something, which is just kind of stupid. Now if they wanted to restrain the thing instead of killing it, they probably should have just sent Caraway down here alone and have him summon the squid mech right on top of it and just wrap its tentacles around the thing, restraining it so it can't move anymore. But no, that would be way too easy. We gotta arbitrarily increase the stakes so we can make things tense. Anyway, our favorite friendship squad meets up with the mermaid and mermen, and Rosemary says something really racist, but they're too nervous to tell her.
Should we have a signal in case anything goes wrong? Something like,
Oh shit, was that racist?
So, out of nowhere, Time suddenly becomes attracted to one of the mermaids for no reason at all. Time up until this point has been characterized as a cold-hearted person who doesn't really open up well to others. She's been friends with Parsley for a long time, and even after all of that, she still doesn't even open up fully to her. So why on earth does Time suddenly display emotions for this person she does not know and someone who also looks about as plain as everyone else around her? Does she just have a thing for mermaids? If so, why that one in particular? Time has been actively shown to take a while to get attached to people, so why does she get attached to this mermaid she doesn't know just because she likes mermaids? That doesn't really make any sense. If that was the kind of character she was, then I'd be fine with it, but they're actively having her break her own character just so they can have this little romance go on. This is what I mean when I say this episode is one of the worst in the series due to its inconsistencies. Things that make no sense are just happening back to back to back. People are breaking character, people are being stupid, and they're breaking their own continuity and world building. Also, there's something I haven't talked about up until this point, and it's something that doesn't just involve this episode, it involves the pacing of the series in general. Episodes 8 and 9 are probably the best in the series in my opinion. Not that it's a high bar, and these episodes definitely have their own series of problems, but the reason that this episode is so good is because things are actually happening. There's a villain, finally. The villain has a mission, and they're trying to achieve that mission, aka they're trying to kill the girls. This out of the blue makes the episodes way more serious than the other ones. They aren't just dicking around doing filler nonsense that has no lasting impact. They're actually doing something important, fending for their lives. They almost achieved this effect in episode 7 when Rosemary was about to die in the cave, but it doesn't get anywhere near this level. There's actual tension and stakes, things are going haywire, I'm invested, finally. We're getting some more information on what the main villains are and what they want. There's some interesting fight scenes going on. Things are going pretty good. So it seems like after tons of episodes just doing jack shit, we're finally reaching some rising action at this point. So how do the writers decide to follow through with all of this build-up? 2 more filler episodes doing jack shit. Olive, who used to be a very active threat and seemingly had an interesting character arc going on, has now been relegated to reading Rosemary's diary. Not 2 episodes ago, she was going to murder every single one of the main cast, and now we're having her de-escalate to petty snooping? The writers realize that having Olive just vanish for 2 more episodes after all that buildup would be pretty ridiculous, so instead they just have her show up in random cameos that are just kind of stupid. If they really wanted to hit this mermaid episode and that other episode with the demon, they should have done it earlier in the series before Olive revealed herself. Or even better, have Olive reveal herself near the start and have her be behind a lot of the bad things that happened to the girls. Either of those 2 would have been a lot better than what they do here. Anyway, back on the surface, Caraway and Snapdragon are having their little conversation about why Snapdragon acted the way he did. Maybe it's because he signed up for this military academy that sends out students on suicide missions and where if you aren't the strongest, you're probably gonna die? Nah, that can't be it. It's revealed in a flashback that Snapdragon has come from a toxic home where people fight each other all the time and his father's encouraging him to beat the shit out of his brothers if they mess with him. So perhaps Snapdragon's father sent him to this academy so that he could learn to fit in more with the warriors of the world? But honestly, based on the stuff that happens in this academy, the only thing he'll be fitting into is a body bag. I've gone over this in my other videos, but no self-respecting parent would ever send anyone to go to school here. I don't care how manly you think your kids are, they ain't gonna live through this unless they got plot armor. Luckily, Snapdragon's plot armor is in tip-top shape, otherwise he wouldn't be here right now. He probably would have gotten eaten by a dragon or something. Now, I know the conversation Caraway had with Snapdragon is a bit of a contentious topic on the internet. People get into flame wars left and right about this kind of stuff. I'm not gonna talk about it. It's not really relevant to my problems with this episode. It's kind of a minor thing. Sure, it could have been handled better, but if we were here talking about all the things that could have been handled better in this show, we'd be here all year. Besides, this video is way too long already, so I'm just gonna skip to the end. Sage's Terrasphere goes absolutely wild out of bumfuck nowhere, and instead of just dropping the stick like any smart person would do, she decides to keep holding it while it blasts a laser right at the dragon. Now, ignoring the fact that this thing has so much energy that it could blast through a dragon that no one else could damage on the team, just goes to show that magic is overpowered as fuck. This is another example as to why you shouldn't be sending inexperienced children to deal with these important issues. They were in no way prepared for this, and because of that, they failed the mission and end up killing the dragon that they're not supposed to kill. Granted, it would have been smarter if they just french-fried that dragon right away, but that wasn't what they were told to do. Also, as I mentioned in the school system video, the potions teacher out of absolutely nowhere shows empathy for the girls and their situation. Up until this point, she's been a complete psychopath who's put children's lives in danger without caring at all, so it makes absolutely no sense for her to act like this. If this was some kind of character development where she learns to become a better person, that would be fine, but that isn't what's going on here. She doesn't show any development, she just suddenly flip-flops on her character for no reason. Another strike on the imaginary inconsistency tally. So, to end off this depressing episode, Rosemary decides to put the dragon down. It's like Old Yeller, except filled with dipshits. And like that, it's over. A depressing ending where a dragon is put to death. We also cut to Snapdragon basically crying as Amaryllis comforts him, showing once again that she's the best character. So the end of this episode just creates an atmosphere of depression and somberness. So how do they follow this up? You see, shit like this is why I like shows that change their outro depending on the episode. Granted, they don't have the budget for that, but still ending it like this? God. Such stupidity. But yeah, there you have it. This is, in my opinion, the worst episode in the entire series. Which is difficult considering there's literally 12 episodes of garbage. Granted, there are some garbage pieces that smell better than the others, but still garbage. But maybe you disagree. Maybe you think there's another episode that's even worse than this one. Well, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments down below. Tell me your least favorite episode and give me some reasons why. I'll read them. I promise. That is all. See ya.